What do you do when the most dangerous man in Vegas threatens to kill you in front of 3,000 people? If you're Dean Martin, you hand him the microphone and ask him to sing. The Copa room at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas was a pressure cooker on the evening of June 18, 1965. The air, normally thick with cigarette smoke and the heady scent of expensive perfume and bourbon, was now charged with a different, more dangerous electricity. All 2,800 seats were filled, the audience a glittering sea of tuxedos and sequined gowns. But their usual buzz of pre-show anticipation had been replaced by a tense, watchful silence. The source of the tension occupied the first 3 rows. They were not the usual high rollers or starstruck tourists. They were men in impeccably tailored, somber suits, their expressions uniformly blank, their eyes constantly scanning the room. They sat with a stillness that was unnerving, their hands resting on the tables or in their laps, not fidgeting, not smiling. And at the very center of this grim phalanx, directly in front of the stage, sat Vincent the Chin Antonelli. Antonelli was a monument of controlled menace. He weighed close to 250 pounds, most of it solid, and his face was a roadmap of old conflicts, a nose that had been broken more than once, a thin scar tracing the line of his jaw. His eyes, the color of wet slate, held no warmth, only a calculating intelligence. He did not speak to the men beside him. He simply sat, a crystal glass of amber liquid untouched before him, his gaze fixed on the empty stage. The message was clear to every employee of the Sands who dared to glance his way. This was not a social call. Vincent Antonelli was not here to be entertained. He was here on business. Backstage, the atmosphere was just as fraught. Dean Martin's dressing room, usually a sanctuary of calm preparation filled with the scent of his favorite hair tonic and the soft clink of ice in a glass, felt like a bunker awaiting an assault. His young assistant, Jackie Romano, was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to straighten a stack of sheet music. "Dean, for the last time," Jackie pleaded, his voice a strained whisper. "Cancel, plead laryngitis, something." He bought out the first 3 rows, him and 20 of his associates. "They're not here for the music." Dean Martin stood before the mirror, his reflection, the very picture of unflappable cool. He meticulously adjusted the knot of his black bow tie, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. "They paid for the tickets, didn't they, Jackie? That makes them customers. The customers are always right." His voice was its usual relaxed baritone, devoid of any tremor. "This isn't about customer service," Jackie hissed, glancing at the closed door as if expecting it to burst inward. "You've been blowing off his messengers for 3 days. Herman told you what it's about, that dancer from the Tropicana he's seeing. He thinks you're filling her head with Hollywood dreams." Dean turned from the mirror, picking up his tuxedo jacket and slipping it on with a graceful shrug. "I've never met the girl. I don't even know her name. Vincent Antonelli has a problem with his girlfriend. That's between him, her, and maybe a marriage counselor. It's got nothing to do with Dean Martin." "It does now," Jackie insisted. "You made him look weak in front of his crew. You don't ignore a man like Antonelli. He's not some casino manager you can charm. He's Vincent Antonelli." The name itself was a threat. Whispered in the backrooms of every casino in Vegas, he was an enforcer for the Nevada crime family, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency and brutal violence was so well established that even other mobsters tread carefully around him. Rumors linked him to a dozen disappearances, though nothing ever stuck to his expensive suits. Dean poured 2 fingers of scotch into a glass, took a slow sip, and regarded Jackie with a look that was both patient and utterly immovable. "Jackie grew up in Steubenville, Ohio. My old man cut hair in a backroom where they run numbers. I've known guys like Antonelli my whole life. You know what they understand: strength. You show an ounce of fear, they smell it like blood in the water. Then you belong to them." "I don't belong to anybody." He set the glass down. "I work for the Sands. I sell out this room night after night. Vincent Antonelli doesn't own me, and he doesn't own this stage. Now, are we going to put on a show or not?" Before Jackie could formulate another desperate argument, the stage manager's voice came over the intercom. tight with anxiety. 5 minutes, Mr. Martin. Dean winked at his terrified assistant. Relax, kid. It's just another Friday night. But it wasn't. As Dean walked toward the wings, he could feel the unnatural quiet of the audience seep through the heavy velvet curtains. The bandleader, normally cracking jokes, was stone-faced, tuning his instrument with intense concentration. Dean took a deep breath, not of fear, but of focus. The stage was his domain, the one place in the world where he felt absolutely in control. That control was about to be challenged in the most direct way possible. The curtains parted, the spotlight hit him, and Dean Martin sauntered onto the stage with his signature loose-limbed grace, a grin spreading across his face as the real audience, beyond the first 3 rows erupted into applause that sounded more like relieved exhalations. He raised a hand in greeting, his eyes already scanning the front. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he drawled into the microphone, his voice a soothing balm. "Welcome to the Sands. Lovely to see you all. We're gonna have ourselves a time tonight." His gaze swept over the silent block of suits. Vincent Antonelli hadn't moved a muscle. His cold eyes were locked onto Dean's, a predator watching its prey. Dean held the look for a fraction of a second longer than was comfortable, then broke it with a casual glance at the band. "Let's start off with a little number," he said, and nodded to the conductor. The opening chords of "Ain't That a Kick in the Head" filled the room. Dean launched into the song, his performance seemingly effortless. He moved with his characteristic relaxed swagger, but his senses were heightened, hyper-aware of the man in the front row. He sang directly to the audience, telling jokes between verses, but his peripheral vision never left Antonelli. The mobster didn't clap, didn't smile. He just sat, a statue of impending violence. Dean finished the song to thunderous applause, which again died into an awkward silence as it reached the first 3 rows. The contrast was chilling. "Thank you, you're too kind," Dean said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I gotta say, I'm getting a lot of love from the back of the room. You folks up front, you saving your energy for later? That's okay. I know it's hard to clap when you're busy counting your blessings. Or your money." A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. The men in the suits remained impassive. Dean moved into his next number. "Memories are made of this." He was halfway through the first verse when Antonelli moved. It was a small, deliberate motion. He reached inside his jacket. Dean's heart hammered against his ribs for one terrifying beat, his voice catching almost imperceptibly, but Antonelli's hand emerged holding only a silver cigarette case. He extracted a cigarette, tapped it twice on the table, and placed it between his lips. Another man, seated to his left, immediately leaned forward with a lit zit. Antonelli inhaled deeply, the tip glowing bright red in the dim light, his eyes never leaving Dean's. Then, as he exhaled a plume of smoke, he did it. Slowly, deliberately, he drew the index finger of his free hand across his own throat. The gesture was unmistakable, medieval, and deadly serious. A collective gasp, quickly stifled, came from the tables nearby. The band faltered. The trumpet player missed a note. The entire room seemed to freeze, the festive atmosphere evaporating instantly. All eyes darted between the mobster and the singer on stage. Dean Martin stopped singing. The band, confused, played a few more discordant bars before grinding to a halt. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the Copa Room. 2008. 100 people held their breath. Time seemed to stretch, elastic and unbearable. Dean stood at the center of the stage, the microphone loose in his hand, looking down at Vincent Antonelli. The spotlight isolated him, making him a perfect target. In that suspended moment, Dean's mind didn't race through escape plans or regrets. Instead, he thought of his father's backroom in Steubenville, of the tough guys who came in, all bluster and threat. He remembered the one universal rule: you never, ever back down in the moment of challenge. To do so was to lose everything. A slow, easy smile spread across Dean's face. It wasn't a smile of mockery, but of genuine, almost amused engagement. "Well, folks," he said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Looks like we're gonna have to take a little detour from our scheduled program. Tonight, he took a few, leisurely steps toward the front of the stage. The audience watched, mesmerized and horrified. Antonelli's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Dean reached the very lip of the stage. He looked down, directly into the mobster's cold eyes from a distance of only a few feet. "Sir," Dean began, his tone conversational, as if addressing a friend at a bar, "I couldn't help but notice you've been sending me some pretty strong signals tonight. Now, I'm not the best with sign language, I'm more of a verbal guy, you know, but I'm pretty sure I got the gist of that last one." He paused, letting the tension coil even tighter. No one dared to breathe. "So, I'm thinking," Dean continued, his smile never fading, "if you've got something you really want to communicate, why keep it to yourself?" He knelt down on one knee at the edge of the stage, placing himself at Antonelli's eye level. He extended his arm, offering the microphone toward the mobster. "Why don't you come up here and share it with the whole class? In fact," Dean's voice took on a playful, challenging note, "since you seem to have such strong opinions about the entertainment, why don't you come up here and give it a shot yourself? The stage is yours. Show us how it's done." The audacity of the act was breathtaking. He wasn't just defying a threat, he was openly inviting it into the spotlight, transforming a potential murder into a potential duet. He was calling Antonelli's bluff in the most public way imaginable, forcing the mobster to either escalate to unthinkable violence in front of thousands of witnesses or to stand down. The silence that followed was absolute, a physical weight pressing down on the room. All eyes were locked on Vincent Antonelli. His men shifted almost imperceptibly, hands moving closer to their jackets. The decision was his alone. A nod, a flick of his wrist, and the night would end in bloodshed. Antonelli stared at the microphone, then up at Dean Martin's face, which was still lit with that fearless, slightly quizzical smile. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The tension was at a breaking point. And then, Vincent Antonelli began to laugh. It wasn't a warm, hearty laugh. It was a low, rumbling sound that started deep in his chest. A laugh of pure, incredulous astonishment. It was the laugh of a man who had seen everything, controlled everything, and had just encountered something entirely new. "You got stones, Martin," Antonelli said, his voice a gravelly bass that carried easily in the silent room. "A real set of marble stones on you. I'll give you that." Dean's smile widened into a grin. "Is that a yes on the singing? The band knows all the standards. Just name your key." Antonelli shook his head, the cold smile still on his face, but now tinged with something that might have been respect. "Nah, you keep singing, Dean. That's what they paid to see. That's what you're good at." Dean rose smoothly to his feet. "You sure?" The offer's open-ended. "Anytime you feel the urge to croon, you just wave me over." "I'm sure," Antonelli said. He picked up his untouched drink, took a slow sip and added, almost as an afterthought, "You're all right. Dean, keep doing your thing." Dean gave a slight, gracious nod, as if accepting a compliment from a respected peer. He turned and walked back to center stage, his gait still relaxed. He adjusted the microphone stand and addressed the stunned audience. "Well, folks, it appears the maestro has decided to remain in the audience for now. Can't blame a guy for trying, right?" He waited for the nervous, scattered laughter to die down. "But before we get back to it, let's have a nice, warm round of applause for my friend in the front row. A tough critic, but hey, we all need him." The audience, released from its collective paralysis, erupted into applause that was first hesitant, then frantic with relief and burgeoning awe. They were applauding not just the performer, but the act of defiance itself. Vincent Antonelli, with a faint, bemused smirk, raised his glass in a silent toast toward the stage. Dean launched into "That's Amor" with renewed vigor, and the rest of the show proceeded, as if the interruption had been a planned comedy bit. The band played with more swing. The audience laughed louder, sang along more heartily. The threat had been not just neutralized, but transformed into a part of the legend. Antonelli and his men stayed for the entire performance. When Dean took his final bow, the mobster stood and clapped, a slow, measured applause, his eyes never leaving the man on stage. After the show, the backstage area was buzzing with whispered accounts of the miracle that had just occurred. Dean was in his dressing room, pouring himself a well-earned scotch, when a single, firm knock sounded at the door. Jackie, who had been babbling with relief, went silent, his eyes wide. Dean just nodded toward the door. "Get that, will you, kid?" Jackie opened it to reveal Vincent Antonelli, standing alone. The massive frame filled the doorway. "Can I come in, Dean?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Sure, Vincent. Drink?" "Scotch." "Neat." Dean poured a second glass and handed it to him. Antonelli closed the door, leaving a terrified Jackie on the other side. The two men stood in the quiet room. The only sound, the clink of ice in Dean's glass. Antonelli took a sip. "You know why I wanted to talk to you." "The dancer," Dean said, leaning against his dressing table. "I heard. Like I told my people, I've never met her." "I know that now," Antonelli nodded. "Turns out she was talking about some 2-bit talent agent from La. The situation's been handled." He didn't elaborate, and Dean didn't ask. Some knowledge was a burden you didn't need. "The thing is," Antonelli continued, fixing Dean with his slate-gray eyes, "I sent for you 3 times. You made my guy look like a chump. Made me look like a chump in front of my associates. I can't have that. You understand the position that puts me in." "So you came to the show," Dean said, "to make a point. To see what kind of guy you were," Antonelli corrected. "Most men, they see me, they see my friends, they get the message. They get scared. He shook his head, that almost smile returning. "You walk right up and hand me the mic. You got no fear, or you're the best damn actor I've ever seen." "A little of both, maybe," Dean replied, taking a sip. Antonelli finished his drink and set the glass down with a definitive click. "I respect that. I respect a man who stands his ground." "We're square, Dean. You didn't do nothing wrong, and I don't hold a grudge against a man with guts." He extended his hand. Dean took it. The handshake was firm, brief, and final. "But, Dean," Antonelli said, pausing at the door, "a word of advice? Next time I send someone to talk, maybe don't make him come back empty-handed 3 times. It's bad for business." Dean nodded. "Understood. Good. Enjoy your night, Payson." And with that, Vincent Antonelli was gone. The crisis had passed, not with a bang, but with a handshake. The fallout from that night was immediate and profound. By the next morning, the story was on every lip in Vegas. From the blackjack dealers to the hotel maids to the big bosses in their plush, hidden offices. Dean Martin hadn't just survived Vincent Antonelli. He had faced him down on his own terms and emerged with the mobster's respect. A seismic shift occurred in the unspoken hierarchy of the city. Entertainers were no longer seen as mere employees, pleasing but ultimately disposable amenities. Dean had demonstrated that a man with enough charisma, composure, and raw courage could command a room and respect from anyone, even those who ruled through fear. Frank Sinatra called Dean early the next afternoon. "Dino, are you completely out of your mind?" Frank's voice was a mix of anger and awe. "Do you have any idea what that animal could have done to you? I could have smoothed this over with a phone call." "I know, Frank," Dean said, relaxed, "but that's just it. If I'd needed you to smooth it over, I'd have been indebted to you, to him, to the whole arrangement. These guys, they understand one language: strength. You show a crack, they own the whole wall. I showed no crack." Frank was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, sharp burst of sound. "You crazy, magnificent son of a gun. You're either the bravest wop I know, or the dumbest." "I'm leanin' toward brave." "I'll take it," Dean chuckled. In the years that followed, the story took on a life of its own, embellished with each retelling in casino lounges and late-night talk shows. Some versions had Dean pulling a derringer from his pocket. Others claimed Antonelli stormed the stage, and Dean knocked him out with a single punch. The myths grew because the truth was almost too compelling to believe. That one man's unshakable cool had disarmed a lethal situation without a single raised voice or thrown punch. The reality was legend enough. Vincent Antonelli and Dean Martin maintained a distant, mutual respect. Antonelli would occasionally attend Dean's shows, always in the front row, now applauding genuinely, a faint smile on his scarred face. He had become, in his own twisted way, a fan. When Vincent "the Chin" Antonelli was gunned down in a mob hit outside a Las Vegas steakhouse in 1973, a victim of the very world he ruled, Dean Martin was asked for comment by a reporter. Dean, who had long since perfected the art of saying nothing meaningfully, simply said, "Vincent was a tough guy, a hard man, but in his way, he was a man of his word. He understood respect." It was the closest to a eulogy the mobster would get from the legitimate world. For his part, Dean always downplayed the event in later years. People make too much of it, he'd say with a wave of his hand. A scotch in the other. Some fella in the front row was being a distraction. I just figured, if he wants to be part of the show, let him be part of the show. That's all. The nonchalance was itself a performance, protecting the sacred truth of the moment. But those who were in the Copa room on June 18, 1965, knew what they had witnessed. They had seen the essential Dean Martin laid bare. The charm wasn't a facade, it was his armor. The relaxed demeanor wasn't an act, it was his weapon. In a city built on illusions, his courage was utterly, devastatingly real. That night, the microphone he offered wasn't just a piece of stage equipment. It was a symbol of agency, of control. It was a challenge and an invitation. You want to stop my show? Then you have to take it from me here, in front of God and everybody. And in recognizing that challenge, and choosing not to accept it with violence, Vincent Antonelli had, in his own way, conceded the stage to the man who truly owned it. Dean Martin's legacy is built on a mountain of hit records, beloved films, and iconic television appearances. But the core of his legend, the heart of the king of cool persona, was forged in those few minutes, under the hot lights of the sands. It was the moment a singer, armed with nothing but his wit and his will, stared into the abyss of organized crime, smiled, and asked if it knew the words. And in doing so, he didn't just save his own life. He defined an era and cemented a reputation for fearless authenticity that would endure long. After the neon of old Vegas had faded, he proved that sometimes, the ultimate power lies not in the threat of force, but in the absolute refusal to be forced.